One more freeware game before I analyze a bigger release. Today we are analyzing a freeware game called Truck Racing by Renault Trucks. Hi everyone, as always Patrick here. If you're already subscribed, make sure you turn on notifications, otherwise YouTube won't tell you if I posted anything. If you are new to the channel, make sure you watch until the very end and consider subscribing if you like it. Okay, Truck Racing by Renault Trucks. Truck Racing by Renault Trucks was developed by GameSeed and published by Renault Trucks as a freeware advertisement in 2009, and the most recent release, that being version 0.2.7.6, being released in 2010. This is also the version I'm playing and analyzing. This version adds few new tracks, a livery editor, and well, that's it. That's all this recent release really adds. You know the deal. We are starting this analysis video by talking about the graphics. For a freeware game released in 2009 or 2010, depending which version you're playing, this actually looks pretty good for a freeware game. To prove my point, let's compare this game to other racing games that also came out in 2009. Freeware games, of course. There aren't many freeware games that came out, especially racing freeware games, but there are two that come to my mind. Ferrari Virtual Race and Volvo the Game. Comparing Truck Racing to those two freeware games I've mentioned, they look very similar, but I would say that Truck Racing looks a little bit better, mainly because of all the effects this game has, as few as this game has, but still, in my opinion, it looks slightly better than those two. When it comes to 2010 comparisons, well, I got nothing. However, while the game looks good, the developers cut corners in some places. For example, the humans, the viewers, are basically those cardboard cutouts. Cardboard cutouts in 2009. This is unacceptable, even in a freeware game. You will also be able to see in the footage that the game also looks a bit dated. I mean, well, duh, it's a game from 2009/2010. But for the purpose of the video, I'm gonna say the official release wasn't back in 2009, just so we're clear. But anyways, going back to those dated graphics thing, you can really see that on trees and some of the backgrounds in some tracks. But other than that, the graphics are still solid, and some graphical aspects still hold up. But again, you will be able to see that during the gameplay. What about the graphical options? Well, the game does support widescreen resolutions, there is VSync, there is anti-aliasing, there is anisotropic filtering. You can use windowed mode, but let's be honest, no one plays games like these in windowed mode. And the game does run above 120 FPS, which means that your gameplay is going to be smooth. So that's all well and good. However, there are three big problems with the graphics. But first I need to talk about one smaller issue. It is unknown if the game supports 4K resolutions. It does support resolutions up to 1080p, but 4K and higher, currently unknown. Okay, so what are those three big problems? The first big problem is with the anti-aliasing. The game does support anti-aliasing up to 8 times FSAA. However, anti-aliasing cannot be used simultaneously with Shader Model 2.0 and may cause glitches in mirrors. Let me explain. When you launch the game, you get this little external launcher. And in there you can choose some graphical options, only some. You can customize the rest while you're in game. And one of those options, actually two of those options in this external launcher is choosing your anti-aliasing and the shader model. There are three main shader models you can choose. The first one is no shader model at all, which is weird. The second one is shader model 1.3, and the third one is the shader model 2.0. When you use the shader model 2.0, anti-aliasing stays off. It's not like you can just, choose it. Like you just can't choose it. It stays off. But if you change the shader model to 1.3, you can choose any anti-aliasing option you want. Why is it done like this? Why can't I choose the best shader model and anti-aliasing simultaneously? Who thought that separating them would be a good idea? Come on, the game would look a lot better with both of those options enabled, so why Game Seed? Why? Oh, and in case you will ask, I don't think anyone will ask, but just in case, I'm playing this game with the shader model 2.0, which you are able to see right now on the video. What about those two other problems? Well, here's the second one. There's bloom, there's depth of field, and motion blur. They're distracting and they're only here to hide bad graphical effects. That's their entire purpose in this game. Although let's be honest, you can say the same thing about any game out there. With this footage I wanted to show you my experience, obviously. So for the purpose of the video, I kept those options on, even though I shouldn't. But if I was playing by myself, I would turn those off. And here's a friendly advice for you. If you're ever going to play this game, turn all of those options off. Like I've said before, they're distracting and they don't really add anything to the game. Thankfully, turning those options off is very easy. All you have to do is go to the options menu and then look for all of those features and just turn them off. I mean, it's so easy. Like, why am I even explaining this? Why am I explaining this if it's in the game? You can easily turn those off. I don't know, I just felt like saying this. But there is one thing that you can't fix, and that is the big issue number 3. There is no FOV slider. And no one knows how to change the FOV, so you're stuck with the default FOV. That isn't good. As for the stability, it didn't crash, it didn't stutter, it didn't lag. The frame rate was stable except for when I was recording, but let's be honest, if you're going to play the game, you're not going to make gameplays of it, I assume. So you're not going to encounter any problems. So for the most part, it's a good freeware PC release. It just made some weird choices in the end. I've been talking about the graphics for 10 minutes. That's a new record for me, actually. So I guess now we can talk about the story, if the game had one. Yeah, it's one of those freeware games that doesn't have a story, or just like most racing games in general, especially around that time. So I guess we can just talk about the gameplay. Thankfully, there's a lot more to talk about. I have to say that for a freeware game, the gameplay is good with few minor issues. But let's analyze the gameplay step by step. For starters, there are only two vehicles and four different racing tracks, which is so far the the game with the most amount of tracks. Well, freeware racing games, of course. Let's start with the vehicles or the trucks. Since they are easier to analyze. Like I've said, there are two trucks in the game. There's a 2010 edition of this truck and the 2009 edition of this truck. Both of them behave exactly the same and both of them have the same sound effects. I did not notice anything different while using them. They have different skins, but that's about it really. When you go to the options menu, sorry for stuttering so much, you can choose your driving style. And by driving style, I mean, do you want to drive with the assists or not? In this video, I didn't use any assists, and despite the fact that the assists were off, I still had a good time. The trucks behave well, even though they can spin around sometimes if you turn too hard. But most of the time, and when I say most of the time, I mean all the time, the trucks behave well since they behave exactly the same. Now, of course, if you play with the assists being turned on, the trucks behave even better, but there is one small issue. The trucks just don't want to turn, or they just have a harder time turning. But even then, they are still easy to control. You can't really simulate them. It's mostly very arcadey. But I can give it a pass. You don't need to make your game about racing trucks a simulator, although it would be nice to see. So the trucks behave as intended, even with the assist turned off. Who would have thought? Yeah, in a freeware racing game. You can also see how much damage your truck has taken, but this doesn't change anything at all. Maybe sometimes if you damage the tires, the truck doesn't behave very well, but still, as you can see, I have damaged my truck 100%, well, the body part at least, but I can still drive perfectly fine. If you don't want to play with this, you can turn off the damage system. It's that easy. Your tires can also overheat, but nothing changes. They didn't go boom boom or anything, so why bother? There's a lot more I can say about those trucks and how they behave, but there are a lot of options. You can mess around in the options menu. So I'll leave this to you. Now about the tracks you race on. Like I've said before, there are 4 tracks in the game. They are all nice to look at, and I have to say that for a freeware game, they are well designed. They all range from being 2 to 4 kilometers long, and they feel like an actual racing track. And I don't really have anything to complain about here. All of those tracks feature all all kinds of turns and twists, up and downs and all arounds. Some of those tracks are easier to complete than others, like for example the first one you saw, that one is pretty easy. Or maybe you like some of the harder tracks, like the one you're seeing right now. This kind of track is what I consider a hard kind of track. Lots of sharp turns, inclines or declines that can either speed you up or slow you down. Yeah, I don't know what to say about those tracks. They are all nicely designed. Uh, they all feel smooth, and driving on them feels like smooth sailing. All kinds of turns, inclines and declines, smooth sailing. I like those tracks. I like them. What also helps is the fact that those trucks behave like normal racing cars. They're just bigger. Maybe that's what makes them so smooth. I don't know. Now let's talk about the HUD or the UI. Well, as you can see, the HUD is already outdated, but it gives you a lot of options actually. If you go to the options menu, you can choose what you want to see on your screen. And if you really want to, you can turn off everything. So that means there's no HUD. There's just you, your truck, and you enjoying the scenery. You can see that GameSeed wanted to make an enjoyable experience for the player, and the effort shows. Now that I think about it, my analysis doesn't really do the game's justice. You really need to check the game for yourself to see what else you're missing. Or maybe I enjoy this freeware game so much that I just don't know how to explain the fun parts of it. Who knows? I am not saying that the game is perfect, but I had fun playing it. There is a little bit of missed potential though. I mean, you could also do cargo races. You know, you have a cargo on your back that's harder to control. Why isn't that a thing? I don't know. Maybe because it's just a freeware game and I don't know, maybe the developers didn't have enough time to implement this. They could have made more updates. I mean, the most recent update was in 2010, so I don't know. I don't see the problem. Obviously, nowadays it's too late for an update, but if GameSeed really wanted to, they could make more updates. Or how about make those existing tracks in reverse? So instead of 4 tracks, there are 8. You know, more variety, more gameplay. That could be a good idea, so I don't know what's the problem. I have just realized that I didn't talk about the handling. I mean, I did talk about it partially, but not in detail. But honestly, there's not much to talk about here, so I'll just make it quick. The, those trucks move as intended, like I've said before. They go forward without any problem. They they brake without any problems, and they can also turn without any problems. However, you also need to consider the fact that I was playing with the assists turned off. Obviously, you have to experiment for yourself with those assists both on and off. You don't have to turn off every single assist on or off. When you check the options, you can see that you can turn those off. You They can have a higher level of efficiency or effectiveness, sorry, or a normal level, so you don't even have to turn them all the way down. Like I've said, there's a lot you can mess around with, so it's really up to you. Like I've said before, I'll leave this to you. Now I am thinking to myself, what else can I complain about, or do I have anything else to complain about? I mean, I have complained about the anti-aliasing thing when it comes to the graphics. I have also complained about the trucks spinning around sometimes if you're not careful and if you don't have the assists turned on. But other than that, I don't think I have anything to complain about. Wait, what's that? Actually, you know what? Scratch that. There is one more thing I have to complain about. The sand obstacle. This obstacle doesn't make sense. Those are trucks. They are big. They have gigantic wheels. They can be driven on anything. And yet when you accidentally when your truck is accidentally on sand, well, accidentally or intentionally, it can't really turn. It still turns better than in games like BMW M3 Challenge, but still, it goes so slowly. Every single opponent is able to overtake you, especially on the highest difficulty level which I was playing on. Speaking of which, there are three difficulty levels: easy, normal, and hard. They're not; those aren't the actual names. I just call them like that. But anyways, I was playing on the hardest difficulty, and I have to say, easy difficulty is way too easy. Normal difficulty feels okay, but still a bit too easy. And on hard, or should I say pro difficulty, okay, fine, I'll use the actual names: beginner, amateur, and pro. Pro difficulty being the highest and the beginner difficulty being the lowest. On pro difficulty, sometimes they just go too far with this. But then again, so does almost every racing game with those difficulty options. To make this obstacle even worse, your truck is glued to it. Well, almost. You can still move around, but it feels like it's glued to the ground. And it's so annoying. Now I know you're supposed to stay on track, but that's not my complaint here. My complaint here is that this sand obstacle doesn't make sense. Like I've said before, they are trucks. Trucks are able to overcome anything. Well, almost. But this obstacle doesn't make sense. In conclusion, truck racing by Renault Trucks is definitely one of the better freeware racing games. And I have to say, give it a go. Like I've said before, the game is a freeware, even so if you play it and even if you don't like it, the only thing you'll waste in your time, well, I guess I have said that about almost every single freeway racing game I've reviewed, but there's no other way to put it, that's the truth. Good graphics for a freeware game released in 2009, and nicely, very well designed tracks, two decent vehicles, and I have to say, playing this for me was a lot of fun. It's not the best racing game I have ever played, but when it comes to freeware racing games, I would say this is one of the better ones. And I would also say give it a go. Really, give it a go. This game is available almost anywhere on the internet. Just you can also type in Google, and there's a huge chance that you will find a download link even without viruses. So yeah, give it a go, and honestly, if you decide to play this, I hope you will enjoy your time with this game. Who knows, maybe you will enjoy this game just as much as I did. But that pretty much sums up everything I wanted to say in this analysis video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Just